Namaste. We will explore today two personality disorders, narcissistic and dependent. Two personalities defines two ends of the continuum. The narcissistic believes he is too good and the dependent believes is not enough. To discuss the subject today, we have with us psychoanalysis consultant Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
So, can we start with what narcissistic personality disorder and the dependent personality disorder is all about?
DSM-5, in its chapter on personality disorders, talks about 10 different personality disorders. These 10 personality disorders are divided into cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. Right. Narcissistic personality disorder falls under cluster B, and dependent personality disorder falls under cluster C. The narcissistic personality disorder essentially is a disorder of idealization of the self, whereas the dependent personality disorder essentially is a disorder of de-idealization of the self.
Okay.
So the core difficulty in the narcissistic personality disorder is grandiosity, whereas for dependent personality disorder, it is self-devaluation. Interestingly, the narcissistic personality disorder and the dependent personality disorder, they form a very good pair in the real life. In occupation, in personal life also, we see both of them often together. It is a pathological union, but nevertheless, till people are healed, they need something to go on, and often this pathological dysfunctional collusion also is a part solution in that process. So these two personality disorders are very important. They affect a large number of people in the society and are among the more difficult disorders to treat. But increasingly, we are getting more and more attention on these two disorders apart from the antisocial personality disorder.
Right. So, why study the two disorders together? Is there any relationship between the two?
Yes, there are some reasons why we can discuss the two disorders together. The first is, although DSM puts them under different clusters from a behavioral standpoint, which is right, but if you look from the genesis standpoint, they are very close to each other. Many people with narcissistic personality disorder and dependent personality disorder display a childhood event sequence where they had very good mothering for some time in the beginning of the childhood, and after that an object loss took place, and both these personalities have responded differently to the same object loss. Both of them felt severe inferiority, and one accepted that inferiority and got stuck there. The second person used a reaction formation defense and went to the other extreme of grandiosity. So in one sense, if we look at pathogenesis, one model of pathogenesis, both of them, I would not say all people in both the categories, but let us say a substantial percentage, so 60% in both the categories of narcissistic and dependent, we may be looking at a common pathogenesis of object loss. So there is one rationale to study them together, because in terms of pathogenesis, there is a shared phenomena which is at the root of the pathogenesis. Secondly, in real life, they form a very good pair, and often they are seen together. Although it may be a pathological dysfunctional union, but still it allows them to roll on in life. Third, when we look at healing them, the dependent and the narcissistic, One of the models that I have created is the Valley Junction model. And in that Valley Junction model, two of them, if you put together and you start applying them, you can see how easy it is to apply that model for healing, which we'll discuss slightly later. But this is also one element why I would like to discuss them together, because if you apply the Valley Junction model of personality disorders, which I have created for understanding and healing of these disorders, again, we see a lot of commonality between the two. So, these are some of the reasons why I think it is good to study them together. Both define ends of a continuum of self-worth. In one sense, one person idealizes it to become on one grandiose end of the continuum, the second extremely devalues his self-worth and becomes second end of the continuum. So both of them essentially have a crisis of self-esteem, a crisis of self-esteem stability, that both of them are not able to maintain their self-esteem in a stable, normal middle zone. One goes to the grandiose extreme, the second goes to the self-devaluation extreme. But both of them suffer from a crisis of maintaining a normal, stable self-esteem. Right. So these are some of the reasons why we can study the two together and gain a lot of insights by doing the compare contrast kind of thing between the two disorders. Lastly, I have found something which is quite different from DSM. And that is true for the entire chapter of personality disorders, also true for the two disorders we are talking about. And that is, unlike what DSM-5 says, there are a lot of mixed personality disorders. And there are a lot of overt personality disorders. Like, just as you have an overt narcissist who is grandiose, people have now also realized something called overt narcissism, where the person overtly does not display grandiosity, but he has overt characteristics of a narcissist. And there is a very big discussion now on what is called a covert passive-aggressive narcissist. And this category of people are found across millions of homes across the world. And people around them keep banging their heads trying to understand why this person is doing what he is doing. And the passive-aggressive nature of that narcissist, the covert narcissist, always throws you off ground and creates a lot of difficulties for you, most of which are unbearable and difficult to articulate. So there is this whole element of mixed personality disorders and covert personality disorders. And what I have found is there are many people with mixed characteristics of narcissism and dependence. So you may see in the front a dependent personality disorder, but the moment the person gets a chance to become successful in the world, the hidden narcissistic element comes out. And the same person after 5 years looks a very different person. It's almost as though he has changed the diagnosis from dependent personality disorder to narcissistic personality disorder. And this is not something which DSM talks about, but we do find in practice there are mixed personality disorders, a few characteristics of dependent, a few characteristics of narcissistic, that is one, and two, a hidden or a covert personality disorder, where either you have one personality disorder which is covert, or you have one which is overt and second which is covert. And when we look at the narcissistic personality disorder and the dependent personality disorder, we see both these phenomena in practice. One, people having a mixture of traits from either of them. The more traits you have, that becomes the front. But behind that, you also have some traits of the other. The exact opposite. At the same time, some people have one overt and one covert. So the overt may be dependent and the covert may be narcissistic, or the overt may be narcissistic and the covert may be dependent. So these are all the reasons why I think it is profitable to study the two disorders together instead of studying each of them separately.
Right, right. And what is the psychoanalytical explanation of causation of this two personality disorders?
All schools in psychoanalysis have their own ways of explaining each of these disorders. Let us look first at the narcissistic personality disorder. In the narcissistic personality disorder, Freud talks about primary narcissism and secondary narcissism. So he says you can develop this kind of a situation if you are fixated either at the stage of primary narcissism or at the stage of secondary narcissism. Klein talks about the merger of the self with the all good breast. So the all good breast and the self, they merge or identify, or the all good breast is internalized by the self, and therefore the self feels itself idealized. Kohut talks about a different kind of causation. He talks about uh, lack or deficit in mirroring, idealization, uh, self-object experiences, twinship experiences, lack of empathy or too much of impingement, or lack of idealization. All of this or any of this can lead to development of an unhealthy self, and the unhealthy self can become a narcissistic self, a borderline self, or a psychotic self. So Kohut gives a different explanation of why narcissism develops. I have a slightly different explanation of it, which I will discuss in, or I can discuss it right now.
Mhm.
What I call it is the based upon the phenomena of object loss, and I call this model as the Valley Junction model.
Okay.
So I theorize in this way. I start with object loss, but this object loss is followed by some good, sorry, the object loss is preceded by some good experiences. And that is why the person is not going into psychosis.
Okay.
Object loss for some people can also lead them to psychosis. Depends on how early and how intense the object loss was. So in personality disorders, what we see is the initial few months, the person has had good experiences. Maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months, maybe 4 months. And after that, the object loss takes place. So there is a healthy self which is already there, which is why the person does not go on the route of psychosis.
Okay.
The fragility does not go on that route. So
Right, right.
there is an initial good experience and a good constitution. And thereafter, the object loss takes place. Once the object loss takes place, a series of events happens. The first is the child hallucinates what has been lost, the typical Kleinian phenomenon. It knows very soon it cannot satisfy by hallucination, so it attacks the lost object or the lost breast. And therefore, there is a lot of aggression. Despite that, it cannot get back what it wants. And therefore, it now fears that that will again attack it back. So there is a paranoid fear of attack of the bad, which leads to a lot of anxiety. At the same time, there is also a realization of powerlessness.
Okay.
That despite all the efforts it made, it could not get back what it wanted. It exhausted all its power and still nothing could be done. So the powerlessness becomes apparent. Then the loss and the abandonment becomes apparent. The loss, the abandonment, the loss, the pain of loss becomes apparent.
Mhm.
And then the helplessness comes in. So the helplessness is felt. This set of feelings is what this state, the psychological state where all these feelings are there. The feeling of aggression towards the bed breast, the fear of attack of the bed breast, the powerlessness, the object loss, the abandonment, the pain, the helplessness,
Mhm.
or you can say helplessness and pain. That is a more natural sequence. This entire state of feelings is what I say is I call it the valley state. You are deep down into the valley. You have fallen into the valley. Now that state is very difficult to bear, and therefore you have to come out of it using some defenses. Now
Mhm.
in that state, what is most intense and what you can work upon based upon your constitution is what determines how you will come out of it. The narcissist will come out of it with grandiosity, using reaction formation on inferiority and helplessness into grandiosity.
Mhm.
The dependent will come out of it with a template that I have to accept this helplessness and I have to be dependent to survive and to flourish. So this identification, submission and search. So from the same valley state, two personalities come out in a very different way. They take different routes using different defenses based upon their constitution.
Right, right.
So I call this as valley junction model, that the valley state is a junction state, just as in the railway junction. You have Western Railway, Eastern Railway, all going from the same junction. Similarly, that state is a junction state from which one train goes to narcissistic personality disorder, second train goes to dependent, third goes to histrionic, and so on. So this is what I call as the valley junction model of personality disorders.
Right.
That from a normal state, instead of proceeding on the same line, you fall down. And then instead of
Mhm.
coming to the baseline, you just start going up or go somewhere else, based
Mhm.
upon which defenses you use in order to escape from that unbearable valley state.
Right, right.
And in adult life, the narcissistic rage comes out or the anxiety of the dependent comes out because if the defensive state into which they are that is broken, they will fall back into the valley state. And it is the
Mhm.
terror of the valley state, the unbearability of the valley state, which creates the narcissistic rage or the extreme disintegrating anxiety of the dependent personality.
Mhm.
That if the dependent personality loses the object of dependence, right, he would fall back into the valley state, and that anxiety of the valley state is unbearable.
Mhm.
So, in order to avoid falling into the valley state, the person would do anything to please the object on whom he depends.
Mhm.
Similarly, a narcissist would have a narcissistic rage if somebody breaks his fragile grandiosity. Because if the fragile grandiosity is broken, he will again fall back into the valley state.
Mhm.
And the valley state is unbearable, and therefore the narcissistic displays that disproportionate narcissistic rage. So this is my explanation of uh, how the personality disorders develop, both narcissistic, dependent, and many others also, based upon this model, what I call as the valley junction model of personality disorders.
Right.
There are some other explanations also. The cultural explanation is that because of nuclear families and working parents, the object loss phenomena has become a common cultural phenomenon.
Mhm.
And Kohut talks about the guilty man and the tragic man. Previously, we used to have the guilty man where a strong desire of pleasure was suppressed by superego, and that conflict created problems, the neurosis. So it was a drive conflict, a drive superego
Mhm.
conflict, or a drive ego conflict. So it was essentially a drive conflict which would cause the guilty man. But today we have a separate kind of an individual where, because of liberalism in the atmosphere, the drives are not so much restrained, but people don't have enough objects around them. And there is a sort of a universal loneliness and universal loss of objects. And in the early childhood, it is even more so in a nuclear family when both the parents are working. And therefore, Kohut calls this personality the tragic man, where the lack of objects has created problems. So one socio-cultural explanation also is that lack of people around have also led to creation of these personality disorders in those where persecution was not very strong. Another explanation is because of less children and too much of pampering has also led to very large number of narcissistic personalities, where sharing or seeing attention divided has never been an experience of many people. Socio-cultural factors like money or social power or social prestige also are some of the factors which can lead to narcissistic or dependent personality disorders. If a series of very fortunate or very unfortunate incidents happen, that can also lead to either of these disorders. And learning from the parents also is very important. That if the parents are themselves narcissistic or too indulgent, easily the child can become narcissistic. If the parents themselves are dependent or too critical, easily the child can become dependent.
Right.
So these are all psychoanalytic causations of why a narcissistic personality disorder or a dependent personality disorder should develop.
Okay. And how does psychoanalysis proceed with healing of personality disorders?
These disorders are not easy to heal. So in fact, many people also will say that you just can't heal them completely. You can only heal them to the extent of 50 to 75%. And there will be some optimistic people who will say, no, you can heal them. But these are difficult to heal, no doubt about it. And the reason is very simple. The valley junction state, or if whatever you call that initial state, where the pathology developed, that state is so much in the remote past and so difficult to bear that it is very, very difficult to revisit that state, understand it, articulate it, think about it cognitively, and release the feelings in catharsis. So it is not easy to go back to that state. One. Two, when you go back to that state, you will have to feel the fear which you felt then. And you will also have to feel the pain which you felt then. And this can easily come up as a temporary depression, but a very severe temporary depression. So in the healing of narcissistic personality disorders, dependent or histrionic, in the process of healing, as you go deeper, there will be a phase of depression which comes in. And generally people don't want to go through that phase of depression.
Right.
It's a very severe phase, very uncomfortable phase. It is also very difficult for people to know how it develops. So for many therapists and for many patients, both of them, it is not easy to know how it has developed. So these are some of the sort of outline beliefs about healing personality disorders. Coming to what we can do. For these disorders, we essentially have the classical psychoanalytic psychotherapy, or now people also claim ISTDP is giving good results. So these are the two options we have. With regard to the classical psychoanalytic psychotherapy, we would be looking at 2 to 3 days a week for a period of 2 to 3 years. This is not something which we can accomplish in a month or two.
Mhm.
The approach has to be initially cohesion. It's very, very important. Because in the cohesion approach, the safety will be felt. Some self-object experiences which are remaining can be done. Internalization of the good, reliable, stable object, which has not happened as yet, can happen. And this calls for a cohesion approach. You cannot have a Freudian, Kleinian, or ISTDP approach where internalization of a good, reliable, stable object can easily happen. Because to different degrees, they are confrontational. ISTDP is the most confrontational, but otherwise, Kleinian and Freudian also have elements of confrontation through the act of interpretation. It's not an overt confrontation, it's a covert confrontation. But creation of a safe space and the cohesion approach are very good for healing the personality disorders initially, to create a complete safe space where the person does not have to think twice before articulating anything, before feeling anything. The person will also have experiences of self-objects, which is also very essential. Internalize good, reliable, stable object. And after that, go into the interpretative part, which may be cohesion, which may be Freudian, which may be Kleinian. And if necessary, after that, go into ISTDP to bring out the effect if it is not coming. This is the classical way of healing. What I suggest is something like this. Along with this path, do three more things. One, do certain forms of behavioral therapy.
Okay.
Because the insights which you get in psychoanalytic psychotherapy have to be put into practice. And in these disorders, because they are long-standing and they have been there for a very long time, they have almost become normalized. So the behavioral exercises are very important for the person to put into practice the insights which are gained. And when he is not able to put into practice, he can bring those problems back to therapy and have them solved. So not acting out in the sense of acting out, but putting into practice, to use a better phrase. Putting into practice is very essential, and therefore the behavioral tools are very essential. Second is what I have personally found out. Explain to the person, what do you think this possession is? And if the person agrees, if he finds it makes sense to him, in all probability, something around that would be true, if not actually that. And that allows that helps the person to heal himself much faster and much better. And I have experienced that when I explain the Valley Junction model, or when I explain the over the time learning model, and people are able to see in practice that yes, this looks convincing and it operates in practice. Once the causation is known with conviction that yes, I do feel intuitively and I feel convinced that this is the right explanation for my problem. That is a very big accelerator for healing. So the cognitive understanding is very important for this particular range of disorders. That what has started this, and therefore what will help overcome this. So this, the first is behavioral elements to complement the psychoanalytic part. Second is this cognitive discussion. There have been cases where I have taken one full session only for this cognitive discussion. And then started the classical work again. And it has paid very rich dividends. In the next 3 sessions, we achieved what without this cognitive discussion session, we could not have achieved in 10 sessions. So the cognitive discussion, and then the holistic healing component. All the three put together, the classical psychoanalytic stuff, if necessary, followed by ISTDP, that is a central line, and then complemented by the cognitive understanding, the behavioral practice, putting into practice, and holistic healing. This package, uh, to me, appears to be the best bet that I know of to address all the personality disorders.
Right. Yeah. So I'm wondering, holistic healing is something we hear today all the time. Is there a way holistic healing approach can help in healing of personality disorders?
Yes, uh, homeopathy has very good medicines to address personality disorders, at least some of them, if not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Psychodrama is a very good way of experiencing the original trauma, of experiencing the difficult, embarrassing situations where we come out to be non-normal.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, Reiki and pranic healing provide that sort of a relief from anxiety or from anger or from some sort of shame or guilt, which often accompany most of the personality disorders. You also have social support groups, and you have working with some NGOs. All of this helps in putting into practice the good things that we think about or we learn or insights we gain in therapy. Also gives us some satisfaction. At the same time, it very clearly allows us to see how our problem starts rolling on when we try to work in society.
Right.
So
Right.
all of this, whether it is pranayam, whether it is Reiki, pranic healing, uh, psychodrama, homeopathy, all of them have very rich resources to offer to complement the central effort that we are making. They may not provide the central healing on their own. Maybe they are not able to heal completely, but they are very good catalysts. They are very good complementary factors. They are very good accelerators. They are very good quality of life enhancers for a person who is undergoing the central treatment of therapy for this range of disorders.
Right. So, how is the patient education important in the context of this disorder?
The patient must know first that he has a particular disorder. For example, let us say this is very often the case. A person comes to me or comes to you and he says he has some difficulty in relationships. He is feeling depressed because of it. He fights with everyone, cannot get along with everyone, and so on. And when you hear the story, you realize the person is actually suffering from narcissistic personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So the first is to make the person, because these are such long-standing disorders that they have been normalized in the person's mind. He feels he is just different, not that he has a disorder. So the
Right.
first thing is that we have to make the disorder clear, obvious to the person, and make the disorder ego distorted
Mm-hmm.
by pointing out to the person the price he pays for the disorder. So the first is the psychoeducation has to tell the person that if it's a narcissistic personality disorder, you will be displaying grandiosity. You will want to be the center of attraction. You will have a sense of entitlement. You will have very large and mega dreams. You will dream of out of this world success, out of this world beauty, and so on. You will not be able to tolerate criticism. All this will be the characteristics of the person. If you have a dependent personality, the person will have very low self-esteem, will depend on others for decision making, will not be able to uh, handle a situation where he feels if there's nobody around, what will happen to me? I won't be able to take care of myself. He will go out of his way to keep people constant in his life so that they don't leave him and doesn't feel abandoned.
Mhm.
He cannot see his own strengths and will be constantly in the mode of self-devaluation. So
Right.
once you make the personality realize that these are the characteristics that you are displaying, is it right or not? The person says, yes, it is right. Then you tell him this is the disorder. And the person for the first time realizes these characteristics of his are not just different, they are a sickness.
Mhm.
So first he becomes aware that of all the characteristics that I have, this set of 5 or 6 are characteristics of a disorder. And you have to become ego dystonic. I have to remove this.
Mhm.
So awareness of the disorder, becoming ego dystonic of the disorder, the person realizing the price to pay and getting ready to work upon the disorder. That is a very big job of psychoeducation in personality disorder. The second is what works and does not work in therapy. So if you educate the person well, he can tell you what is working and not working in therapy, and therefore you can change the course that. Third, accessing holistic healing, accessing social support groups, doing some social work, knowing why one behaves in a certain way and trying to change it as much as one can, and revisiting past conflicts that when you did not know you had this disorder, in that ignorance, whatever damage you have done to yourself, can you go and undo that damage
Right.
as much as you can? So these elements are very, very important. Um, Lastly, accessing holistic healing and actually using them for reducing anxiety, anger, catharsis in psychodrama, or using homeopathy. And all of this put together, when the person knows scientifically how to put everything together, all of the whole basket of healing tools, it accelerates his healing and enhances his quality of life even in the process of healing. So that is how this whole psychoeducation of the patient is going.
Right. Right. And what should the family members of caregivers do if they are helping someone with this disorders?
First, they also have to be made aware that this set of characteristics constitute a disorder. He is not just different, he is sick. Not in a pejorative, condemnable sense, but in a scientific diagnostic sense. Because often it gets normalized to family members also. That a person grows up in a particular way, so the characteristics of sickness become normal to the person, they also become normal to the family members.
Mhm.
So it has to be made ego dystonic for both,
Right.
so
Right.
that the family members don't pamper the person and feed into the pathology.
Mhm.
So supporting the person is one thing, and feeding into the pathology is quite another. So the parents must be able to separate the two, because in all probability, they would either be supporting and feeding both, and in some cases even persecuting the person for those weaknesses. So the persecution has to stop, support has to increase, and the feeding it has also to stop. And this is a very, very important element of the family and social healing in the personality disorders. Second, family members should realize that this disorder, till it is there, has its own price. The person is going to do certain things which are not right, and the person is going to pay certain price. And the person cannot be completely what he is not at this instant. And over a period of time after healing, he will become a different person. That's a different matter. But at the point what he is bound to act in certain ways, because the personality disorders have their own compulsive ways of thinking, feeling, and acting.
Okay.
So this has to be accepted without persecution. If you persecute the person, if you criticize the person, it adds to the agony of the person. Third, they have to realize that this requires long-term therapy, long-term holistic healing, and long-term self-work. This is not something which will go away or which can be wished away. And therefore, they have to participate and support that long-term healing process, both in terms of money, in terms of time, and also in terms of others. Fourth, they have to tell the therapist what is working and not working. Yet they can do it if you tell them, if you psychoeducate about what the disorder is about, how this happens, and what is the healing process you are following. Lastly, they should not develop any secondary issue of anger, fear, or any shame or embarrassment because of the disorder. So for all of that, psychoeducation of the parents is important. One point I missed, that was of holistic healing, NGO work, social work, and seeking support groups, social support groups. That also the family members have to support it by helping the person finding those sources and supporting the person when the person spends time and resources being there. So all of this, which is so essential to accelerate the healing of the patient and enhance his quality of life, it is smoothed out if the parent education or the caregiver education is adequately done.
Right. So thank you, Mr. Himanshu Vaidya, for sharing your knowledge with us. We have covered today 2 personality disorders. In the subsequent videos, we will be covering other disorders from DSM-5 in the same way. Do watch our coming videos and write to us at hvindia@gmail.com. Namaste.
Namaste.